Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Friday, April 11th, and this week, drivers look to unionize, Waymo gets ads, and the truth behind Robotaxis. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Bryant Greening. Bryant, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Jared. Great to be back. It's been a while when it's just the two of us here.
Yeah, we're back to the basics. It was 4 weeks, I think, in a row of guest hosts, which were fantastic. A lot of great opinions. And then you were off for one of the weeks. So, as I say, sometimes it's good to go back to the basics, and here we are.
That's right. We're back home now.
That's right. Except for me. I will be back in Chicago this week, still in PA, hence my crazy setup here. But it's getting a little bit better.
Good.
But before we do begin, I do want to give a really huge shout out to Legal Reader. So these guys have been sharing and supporting Legal Rideshare, specifically This Week in Rideshare posts for years now. So if you've ever gone on legalreader.com, you've likely seen them there. Well, it's a big thanks to them. So I want to give them a big shout out. If you don't know what Legal Reader is, they kind of say, this is their description. They say Legal Reader has been providing commentary on various legal issues, particularly those affecting consumers, since 2002, exposing the hypocrisy of corporations, other organizations, and individuals whose actions put innocent people in harm's way. Legal Reader, in fact, does not sell any advertising space to corporate interests. They say they believe in doing so would compromise their freedom of expression, something that is in direct opposition to their purpose. So if you ever go on there and see the content, all ad-free, not only corporate sponsors, and the content is provided by Editor-in-Chief Jay Bell, Firefighter Sarah Teller, and Ryan J. Farrick. And again, legalreader.com is where you can find these articles, plus, again, our articles. So if you're ever there, you'll see This Week in Rideshare. And again, thank you guys. You guys are rock stars. So moving on, we're gonna jump into the first story here. Interesting and exciting news, of course. Drivers in Minnesota are looking to unionize. This is from CARE 11. They reported, quote, Minnesota legislators introduced two bills Wednesday that would allow rideshare drivers to form a union. Minnesota legislators settled on a rideshare rate of $1.28 per mile and 31 cents per minute with a minimum ride charge of $5. A separate law went into effect in December 2024 that enforces a minimum pay level for transportation network drivers. Both Uber and Lyft threatened to pull out of the state if even higher pay rates mandated by the Minneapolis City Council had taken hold. If these two new bills pass, rideshare drivers would be able to unionize and bargain for additional pay and benefits. So this is a pretty big deal. I remember, Bryant, the threats, of course, from Uber and Lyft saying they're leaving. There's a lot of cards on the table here. I guess we're going to see what happens.
Yeah, it seems like we've done this before in Minnesota, where we're talking about driver benefits and the drivers really pushing their initiative forward and really having some good success in getting the policymakers on board. Obviously, that kind of fell apart, what was that, about 6 months ago or so. When Uber and Lyft threatened to leave the state and cause all sorts of havoc for everybody. But now we're back, and I'm glad to see that the drivers are continuing to have the ear of the politicians. The drivers are continuing to fight for what they deserve, which is safer conditions, better pay. These are all good things, and it's a real testament to what we've talked about for a long time on this podcast, is keep fighting, keep going. Eventually something's going to break through, and hopefully this bill is the thing that does make it across the finish line, where drivers can have what they're entitled to, have a living wage, be protected in a lot of ways that just every human should have. So I'm glad to see what they're doing in Minnesota. I'm glad to see that it seems to be getting closer to the end this time, and we'll keep our eyes on it.
Yeah, what's interesting is, it says this law went into effect in December of 2024 about the enforcing minimum pay. I haven't really seen any articles or news about what that has done. Obviously, I think we talked about it, and the thought was, hey, Uber and Lyft are leaving because it's going to be so expensive, and no one's going to want to take Ubers or Lyfts anymore. But I mean, it's in effect. That's now. I don't know if they've put that minimum pay up there, but the law is there. So I don't know if you've heard anything on that side either.
Yeah, I haven't heard how it's been effectuated in Minnesota, but I do know that a lot of times Uber and Lyft don't fight these like minimum wage laws with the same vigor as some of the other things that drivers try to propose. So when there's minimum payment, like we've seen in New York, and we see it in Washington, like those things tend to pass. And as long as Uber and Lyft can maintain their independent contractor status, that's something that they're sometimes willing to bend on. So I think that's a good first step, increasing driver pay by a couple notches, but it's the other stuff, the other benefits that we really want to see included. And I'd like to see that pay go up as well. So, they've made some progress here.
Yeah.
I think that this is the time where you keep fighting, you keep trying to get more, because when there's an opportunity and you've got the policymakers' ears, you might as well take it, and you might as well move quickly before they move on to the next topic or next interest group. Now's the rideshare drivers' time, so let's get this thing over the finish line.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we'll see. Again, cards on the table. There's two bills coming in. We'll see what they do. Excuse me. Next story is your Waymo ride may be coming with ads, and this is from the street. Excuse me. And they reported, quote, "It's not news that Waymo records the data from its rides and has cameras inside its vehicles. After all, this is very new technology. The company carefully monitors rides to learn how to improve its product." Man, I'm dying here. While ensuring customers have an optimal experience. This is where it gets interesting. In her post, Wong shows a screen grab saying Waymo is working on generative AI training using interior camera data associated with rider's identity, which provides opt-outs for this and data sharing under CCPA. Waymo explicitly states in this unreleased privacy page that it may share data for personalized ads. Now, Waymo reached out to the street with a comment from the spokesperson saying, quote, "Waymo uses interior camera data to train models on safety, ensure cars are clean, find lost items, etc. The feature, which is still under development, will not include any changes to Waymo's privacy policy, but rather will offer rides as an opportunity to opt out of data for training these ML training purposes." So this is interesting, Bryant, because I think we all saw this coming, but it's already, it's in the terms now. So Waymo is saying, yeah, they reached out to the street, so they were aggressive on this and trying to get ahead of the story. But it sounds like, yeah, Waymo is using the data for safety. They're also looking at more money.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. And the fact that they're updating their terms of service does give us a clue into exactly what they're trying to do. They're not hiding the ball here. Now, granted, these terms of service, most people don't read. They just click through, and if you want to use the app, you're not going through with a fine tooth comb and figuring out what the legalese of all this stuff means. But it's being published now. The information is out there, and certainly this is one way that Waymo is going to make money. The fact that they are going to be able to get drivers out of the vehicles, meaning they're not going to have to pay the drivers' fees or fares. They're going to be able to generate income through the ride itself, the customer paying to get from point A to point B, and they're going to be able to make money through advertisers during the totality of the ride. So there's a lot of ways in which these companies, these autonomous vehicle companies, can make a lot of money really quickly without the overhead that the Ubers and Lyfts have when they've got a driver behind the wheel. So I see them being innovative in the sense that they're trying to find every way they can capitalize on the profit and market share that they're trying to take. So I think this is the future. I think we're going to have a lot of tweaks along the way, and they're going to continue to find ways to monetize these vehicles in any way that they can.
Yeah, I mean, and it makes sense, right? Because this is from the ground up. The system is Waymo. I mean, we've seen Ubers and Lyfts have the tablets like Octopus, but that really relied on the driver maintaining them, keeping the tablets running. And a lot of times I was in Ubers and Lyfts, and it was they were broken or weren't working right. This is a ground up. We know all your data, and we know when you drive, where you're going, what's happening. It's our cars, it's our system, it's our tech, and
Right.
so they can really target the user rider experience in a way that's never been done before. You're really getting into the habits of riders.
Well, and to your point about it being their vehicle, that matters a lot because they can design these vehicles to have screens that display the content in any way that they want. Whereas, you're talking about Octopus and how companies like that largely failed because the drivers just didn't want to install them in the vehicle. There were too many hurdles in terms of performance and, getting them installed, two, keeping them in, proper maintenance or repair, three, finding advertisers to actually go to those third-party companies. Well, Waymo is going to be able to solve that all internally. They're going to put a screen that's attached to the vehicle in some way. They're going to have sales reps that can go out and sell that advertising space. The fact that it's all going to be internal makes it a much easier path for them, as opposed to what Uber and Lyft went through with the third-party companies.
Yeah, 100%. And so again, Waymo was aggressive in saying and approaching the street and saying, "Hey, nothing's changing. Don't freak out about it, but it's clearly coming." I mean, they're preparing for it. So if anyone sees them, I would love to hear from drivers or riders, anyone who uses a Waymo. If you're seeing ads in the car itself, I would be fascinated to know more about it. Right now, we're not seeing it though. So moving on to our final story. What do robotaxis mean for drivers? And this is from Axios. They reported, quote, as robotaxi services begin to spread across America, ride-hailing drivers could worry that they'll be pushed aside in favor of robots, or at least that their incomes will shrink. Drivers on both networks earn about $23 per hour, according to Gridwise, which collects driver data to track the gig economy. So far, the presence of robotaxis in San Fran, LA, and Phoenix haven't affected ride-hailing drivers much, is what Gridwise found. Now, by 2040, S&P Global Mobility is projecting 15 billion ride-hailing trips a year in the U.S., which will be up from 3.6 billion in 2024. About half of those trips will be in robotaxis. The other half will still be driven by humans. They're also saying things like we could see a hybrid network. Some riders will select robotaxis, but others will still prefer a human driver for extra assistance or premium service. The bottom line, the ride-hailing pie is still growing, and robotaxis aren't going to eat it all. This is an interesting article. This is the first time I've really seen the elephant in the room addressed with data, with projections, not just it's going to be everywhere or nowhere or no one's going to take it. Interesting statistics. Hybrid network seems like that makes sense. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think that there's always going to be a place for drivers. I don't think that the robo taxis are going to come in and totally disrupt the market in that way, where there's like the idea of being a rideshare driver doesn't exist anymore. But I have trouble believing that the market share is not going to be significantly reduced for drivers. I think as these robo taxis become more and more ubiquitous throughout the country, they're not just being in certain pockets of the country, certain test cities, people are going to become more comfortable with using them. I think a lot of people are going to opt for the robo taxi. One, because I think it will ultimately be cheaper, like we talked about in one of the previous stories, that if you remove the driver from the car, that's less expense for the company, and therefore they might be able to charge less for the ride. So that's going to be a factor that customers go to. I think some customers actually prefer it from a human interaction safety perspective. I could certainly see, for instance, women at night choosing the robo taxi versus getting in a car with a stranger male. I can see different scenarios where the robo taxi is taking rides that would have originally gone to the driver. So while these projections, seem optimistic, and they're saying that the market share keeps growing for rideshare and drivers really don't have all that much to worry about, I'm not sure that that's how I view it. I didn't do the science, I didn't do the study, but just anecdotally and common sense tell me that people are going to choose these robo taxis, and that means that the driver is getting one less ride than they otherwise would.
Yeah, I was interested. Of course, we always talk about this too. That the drivers earn $23 an hour. We've kind of debunked that. That doesn't seem correct. The one thing that did make sense though about the hybrid network that I thought was interesting is preferring a human for extra assistance. So one of the things that may be is if a rider has a disability or has some sort of other issue that they need a human driver, I think they'll always exist for that. Yeah, I'm surprised that the projection, I mean, they're saying by 2040, that's in 16, according to this article from 2024 to 2040. That's in 16 years, and they're saying it's only going to grow 300% from basically zero. I don't know. I think that's a little bit conservative considering what we're already seeing. Um, and like you said, I just have a hard time believing that it's going to be an equal pie sharing because, like you said, once the companies realize this works, we don't need the drivers. They're going to go out of their way to get rid of the drivers.
Right.
And there's going to be unique circumstances, I think, but I don't know. It seems a little bit conservative to me.
Yeah, and I don't think they're taking into consideration how quickly this is going to grow once it hits. Like
Right.
right now, the robotaxi companies are not ready. They're not ready to take over rideshare. They're still testing the vehicles. They're still learning how to make them safe. It may take another 10 years for them to work out all of those issues and actually fully deploy these vehicles. And during that time, while the robo taxis are being developed or being perfected, yes, I see rideshare as being a major player. Traditional rideshare with drivers in the car. I don't think that's going anywhere. But eventually, the technology is going to be good enough for the robo taxis that it's going to displace everything. Like yes, there will be exceptions. There will be passengers who require extra assistance who want a human driver. Absolutely. But that is not the vast majority of the market share. And I think that the vast majority of the market share will quickly move towards robotaxi once they prove that the technology is ready and they're fully deployed.
Right. And even the article states what you said. They're saying so far the presence of robotaxis in San Fran, LA, and Phoenix haven't affected ride hailing drivers much. Like you said, a lot of these are still test markets, much smaller areas. And I've heard the opposite. I mean, I'm in some of the driver groups, and it's starting to cut into it. I'm not breaking the bank for these drivers, but some have expressed concern that yeah, my rides are down, and the only thing I can think of is that I'm seeing Waymos now. So yeah, I think ultimately this study is a bit conservative. I mean, obviously we'll see. This is a 16-year roadmap. Anything could change. Even the next 2 years, it could be different. So
Right.
that's interesting. Well, that is the stories this week. But so before we head off into the weekend, of course, Bryant, I'll give you the final say before we head in the weekend.
Yeah, always want to remind everybody that Legal Rideshare is available for free consultations. We help drivers, passengers, victims, anybody who's injured due to a rideshare related event. We help collect things like medical bills, lost wages, pain and suffering, and any other damage that you sustain. Time is of the essence. Please call us immediately. You can find all of our contact information at legalrideshare.com, and we're always happy to help.
Sweet. Thank you, Bryant. And as I like to say, that is the end of this week in Rideshare. See you next week.